Looking ahead to a highly anticipated meeting now later this Tuesday in Washington, as Donald Trump is scheduled to host Colombian President Gustavo Petro at the White House to discuss joint efforts to curb drug trafficking and promote bilateral trade. The two men have had a frayed relationship, to say the least. Leftist President Petro has denounced the U.S. leader for being an accomplice to genocide in the Gaza Strip, while Trump has accused his counterpart of being a drug lord. Well, the whole dispute even escalating at one point to Trump making threats of a military attack similar to what happened in neighboring Venezuela. So let's bring in Tiziano Breda now. He's the Latin America and Caribbean senior analyst at ACLED. So Tiziano, thank you for being with us on France 24. What's at the heart of the tumultuous relationship between Trump and Petro? Is it just that their politics appear to be at complete polar opposites?
Morning. Thank you for the invitation. Well, indeed, the beef, if we want to call it that way, between Petro and Trump have been several files. Not only the Gaza issue that was mentioned, not only the issue of drugs and the way in which this government has tried to deal with armed groups that are involved in drug trafficking through negotiations, but also military pressure. But also, in general terms, the approach that the Trump administration has brought to the region when it comes to a rather more assertive, interventionist even approach, which Petro, I think, has been one of the most outspoken leaders in the region that, for example, has also spoken out about the intervention in Venezuela. So there have been different, let's say, divergences that have contributed to this relation sort of being very tense.
So what are you expecting from this meeting? Could we see some iteration of what we saw early in Trump's second presidency with Zelensky, with a dressing down taking place, or actually a more constructive discussions on how to address drug trafficking?
It can really go either way. I understand that there will not be many public moments, or televised moments of that meeting. So probably the Zelensky kind of moment will be avoided, but nonetheless, very much will depend on how the meeting goes. I think Petro's utmost priority is to straighten basically Trump's view of the country and his presidency in particular, when it comes particularly to fighting organized crime, for several reasons. First of all, to maybe revive the military cooperation between the two countries that has been severed by Trump's sort of decision to decertify Colombia as a partner in the fight against crime, but also to revamp Petro's public image at home, tainted by these multiple sort of divergences and clashes with Trump, also with the view to the election this year, so to try and avoid that Trump sort of interferes with the process and maybe favors a candidate from a different party, from the right. And finally, probably to ensure that no further action is taken against Petro himself, given Trump's threats to that Petro could follow Maduro's sort of destiny.
At the heart of the divergences, as you said, between the two men is the issue of drug trafficking. They both have very different approaches as to how to deal with this problem. The United States much more aggressive, much more towards the supply side of the equation. Gustavo Petro trying to have a more maybe progressive approach. How should we judge Petro's sort of results with regards to the drug trafficking problem in Colombia at this stage?
Well, I think there's been quite a disappointment in Colombia, and I think within the Petro administration itself, that I think believe that could use Petro's background and approach to the conflict as leverage to negotiate sort of lasting agreements with the reminders of rebel groups in the country, the ELN, FARC dissidents, and so on. And probably this sort of moral authority wasn't sufficient. So even if there was an initial decrease in violence, given the ceasefires that the Petro administration signed with several groups in 2023 and part of 2024, the situation changed dramatically because these groups took advantage of the situation to expand further, consolidate the control over territory, and try to weaken their adversary. So this has caused severe humanitarian situations, particularly in Norte de Santander, in Cauca, and several parts of the country. And therefore, Petro has resorted again to military pressure, but probably too late in his term to balance that with some carrots, right? So it's unlikely to see any significant achievement to dismantle, to demobilize these groups in the remainder of his term, which is a few months.
Let's take a step back here and look at the United States' wider relationship with Latin America. Later in the week, Donald Trump will be meeting with Honduras' new president, Nari Asfura, someone he's much more fond of than Petro. What's that going to be like?
Well, it's going to be a different kind of meeting. Asfura owes a lot of his election to the Trump administration's public endorsement, basically, and also the the pressure towards national authority to officialize the results, even despite the widespread claims of irregularities in that election. So the meeting, which I think will take place in Mar-a-Lago, not in Washington, will be rather a way for the Trump administration to sort of collect the favor that is done to Asfura and discuss, of course, topics of interest, migration, security, but in particular, I think also trade, when it comes in particular to the zones of the special economic developments, the CEDES, in which the US and some in the close Trump circles have also a stake. It will be basically try and make sure that Asfura aligns with Washington's interest in the region, rather than Asfura bringing some issues to the table, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And Asfura is just one of a string of newly elected right-wing South American leaders. We saw on Monday Laura Fernandez win the presidential election in Costa Rica on the first round. Before her, we also saw similar right-wing or far right-wing victories in Chile, in Bolivia. Is this, can we talk about a rightward shift in South America right now, or is it just a case of the political pendulum just doing what it does and swinging one way and then swinging the other way in the next cycle?
I think it's a bit of it's a bit of both. There is certainly an effort from the Trump administration to influence the electoral outcomes in several parts of the region through a series of tools, such as economic pressure, as we saw in Argentina's legislative elections, even military threats, or diplomatic tools and public messaging, as we saw in the case of Honduras. In other cases, I think there's a general trend of a rightward shift, which is driven by a deterioration of security in several parts of the region, which is exploited by right-wing forces to serve this wave of discontent towards the more progressive approach to security, and favoring or demanding a more hardline approach towards crime. And we've seen that in Chile, taking a role, which we've seen that in Costa Rica. So there's definitely some elements that are favoring the right in this context of deterioration of security. And then, of course, there's the sort of anti-incumbency trend that also plays a natural role. And we've seen 5-6 years ago all the shifts to the left, and now we're seeing a return to the right. So I think it's a mix of both elements.
Tiziano Breda, you are a Latin America and Caribbean senior analyst at ACLED. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on France 24.
Thanks to you. Have a nice day.